A very good evening on Wednesday. I hope everybody's having a good week so far, and good to be back with you in our studies. And today, being Wednesday, I want to put the spotlight on a certain character to talk about. And this one is going to come from the Old Testament today, and we're talking about Shamgar. Don't know if the name Shamgar, if I'm even pronouncing it right. Shamgar, I don't know if that rings a bell with you or not. It may. But who this gentleman is found in the book of Judges. Shamgar actually found himself in the time period of the Judges. That is really a very up and down time for Israel. If you remember that Israel, after Joshua had died, they sinned, and then God would oppress them with an enemy, and then Israel would finally call out, for God to save them, and then God would send someone to save them and judge them for a certain period of time. And it just went like that, up and down, up and down. They would sin, they would be punished. God would save them with a judge, somebody to rule them, and so that went on for quite some time. Well, actually, we find Shamgar sort of in the midst of two judges that we know of. And that's in Judges chapter 3 and Judges chapter 4. In Judges chapter 3, actually there are time periods, or there are people, judges, who are mentioned in the book of Judges, that really not a lot is told about what went on with them. And there's a few of those, but in Judges chapter 3, we can read about Othniel, who we may talk about one day. Ehud, that's a fun one. May talk about him one day. But it was after Ehud had a hand in helping deliver Israel from oppression. And then we know that in chapter 4, after Ehud is going to die, that Israel's again going to sin, and then that's when God is going to send Deborah to help them and deliver them. In between that, in between Ehud and Deborah, at the end of chapter 3 in Judges chapter 3, verse 31, this is all it says. That after him, that is after Ehud, was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. And that's it. That's all that's said of Shamgar. But that's really the important part of what we need to know about him. Don't know a lot about Shamgar, about his life. Apparently, he was a farmer of sorts, or at least had a hand in helping, because he had his hands on an ox goad, which an ox goad basically a big, sharp, pointy stick instrument of various kinds that are used to prod cattle along when they're plowing and so forth. And this was a difficult time in Israel. Deborah later is going to talk about in chapter 5 how spears and swords were scarce among Israelites during some of these times. But at any rate, what we're told about Shamgar is that he had a hand in delivering Israel. Now, did he take a big old army? Did he go conquering, nations around him? Did he go, winning great battles? No. But he had a help in delivering Israel from her oppression. And that is that he was able to kill 600 men of the Philistines. Now, was that all at one time? That's a big question. When we talk about Shamgar in this verse, was that, was there a garrison of Philistines, of 600 men at one time who were, traveling through Israel, or who came, raiding or were oppressing them, and so he just, took them all on at the same time? Or was this, 600 men, various numbers and groups, over a certain period of time? Really don't know. Really doesn't matter either way. But again, one fascinating thing And this is what he did it with. I mean, he used what he had. That could have been because, there were no swords and such available to him or to Israel. But what he had was an ox goad, and he used it to deliver Israel. And I think, if anything, I think what we can learn from Shamgar, although we're not told a lot about him, is he was a man who God obviously used. And he was a man who used what he could. He used what he had. That was an ox goad, a big pointy stick. Not a sword, not some, great army, not chariots, not whatever. I mean, he had an ox goad. But that is what he had available. That is what he used. And he successfully delivered Israel from some of these Philistines and from oppression. But that's what God does. Is God uses anybody with anything. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes God uses great armies and equipment and swords and weapons and so on and so forth. Sometimes he uses one guy with a pointy stick. God can use anybody with anything at any time. And I think that is a big lesson for us we can get from Shamgar today, is in our life. No matter who we are, no matter where we're at, no matter what's available to us, no matter our talents, no matter our abilities, our means, opportunities, all we can do is the best we all can do the best we could do individually. I've got to look and say, what can I do for the Lord? How can the Lord use me? What can I do? What do I have available to help serve the Lord in His kingdom, in this world? And and what we need to know is that it's enough. That if we're doing our best and finding ways to serve the Lord with what's available to us, using our talents, using our abilities, know that God's going to be with us, that God can work through us, He can work in us, no matter what it may be, just like He did with Shamgar. So whether you have a sword and armor, whether you have a pointy stick, whatever you have, use it. Use it to the glory of God. Serve the Lord in your life in righteousness. Give glory to God. Help others any way you can with whatever you can. Do whatever you can. And know that God will work through us to His glory and His will be done. God bless.